Welcome to Lightning Ministries Day Devotional. Today's topic, Standing in the Gap. We're reading from 1 Samuel chapter 17, verses 45 to 47. This is the story of David and Goliath. But what I want you to understand here is that the troubles that come into our lives have different intensities, shapes, and even sizes. Some bigger, some smaller. Let me give you an example. Let's say you have a pile of debt, or you're in an unhappy relationship, or maybe even worse, you're in a difficult job that you don't like, or that your boss is not the most respectful to you. But I realize today in this passage, David faced what you and I would see as an insurmountable problem. He faced a giant. But I think what David saw here was he had already pronounced victory because of the power that he saw that his God had. Now, I realize that we too can be caught up in that same responsibility, realizing that David declared victory over his giant before the battle even began, the same as you and I can. But realize, I think, that what David had here, which most of us may not, is the confidence that was rooted in what he had experienced in the past as God had delivered him through the things that I mentioned earlier, like debt or a difficult job, which means a better job later, or maybe a relationship turned around where you were finding a little bit of compromise and things seemed to be working out. But I think that what happened here in this situation, that David believed that he could triumph in this particular situation because he came in because of what God had showed him. As David even lived his life as a shepherd, he had spent hours alone in the wilderness listening to God's voice. That means he spent time with God each and every day, as I believe that as you and I should do as believers. But sometimes we just let life get caught up in our lives and we're not able to do it, or we don't make that time. Now, even as Goliath's discouragement shouts could not be shaken in this particular conviction about what God was and who he could do, or should I say what he could do through this servant's heart. Goliath didn't know his God or care about his God. All he knew is that he thought he was doing the right thing for the right people. Was he? David, in this particular case, had practical faith habits built in to his life. He had a strong relationship with the Lord that he had developed through spending time with him in his presence. Can you imagine that? How can you hear God in your quiet time if you allow the things of the world to come in and have precedence over what you should be doing and spending quiet time with the Lord? This is the turn that enabled David to face problems that you and I even go through with an extreme certainty that he was a beloved child of God with full access to his Father's storehouses of power, wisdom, and courage. I think a lot of us have a lot of problems with courage in doing things today. But if our doubts are to even arise to what they arose to in David's life, how could he look back with a certainty and assurance that God's great faithfulness would triumph over his past troubles? If you read the story, it talks about how he defeated a bear and a lion in this situation with a sheep. Now, I realize to be victorious in today's life, in our society, you and I should practice David's spiritual habits. What is that? Spend time with God. Keep a record of his work in your life. I journal. I've got a record of it. And anyone that comes behind me after I'm gone, or even now, and reads about my life and the things that I went through and got through and maybe are still going through or whatever, how God's anointing power has given me not only the strength and power, but the assurance that God is faithful and just to do the right thing in my life. I'll find here that if you and I will find how God can defeat our Goliaths in our lives, that we can be confident that He is more than sufficient no matter what the obstacle may be in our lives. As I mentioned earlier, no matter whether you're in debt and trying to get out, or wish you could get out by doing the right thing morally and financially and spiritually, but not only that, your relationship with your loved ones, your children, your wife, your friends, those that are within your community. But most importantly, is the job that you have to spend time with God and not realizing that you're not serving a taskmaster, that you're serving the Creator who created you and loves you and wants nothing more than the best for you. A lot of people can't see that when they're going through things. But I realize that it's our perspective. It's the way we're seeing things. And our lack of understanding of who God is and what God can do if we will lean on Him and not on ourselves to try to get through whatever we're dealing with. Now, I'm not saying this that we don't do our own part and leave the consequences of the situations under God's power. But we don't have to struggle and fight and worry and stress ourselves to the point to where we're not allowing God to help us, because He's a gentleman. He'll step aside if you think you can do it on your own. And then when you think you've completed and finished it, only to have something that you didn't see come in behind it. Challenge you today to trust God to defeat the Goliaths in your life because of His faithfulness and your love and trust for Him to guide you in the light of His Lordship. Hey, listen, thanks for listening today. I appreciate you taking the time to listen to what God is saying to me to share with you today. I pray that in some way that God will help you stand in the gap as David did and realize that God is greater than anything that we'll ever have to deal with in this life. And we really may not understand all of it until we go home. Again, have a blessed day, and thanks for coming.